AAJA News Nerds, we became an affinity group about a year ago, right before the pandemic started. So if you're at all interested in, if you're an AAJA member and you're interested like in that space, feel free to, we have a Slack channel in the AAJA official Slack channel, and where we just kind of like communicate about job opportunities and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of the whole group there. We have three great panelists here, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So we'll just get started and hit the ground running. We can start with Adrienne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Chi. I'm an audience engagement editor at the Los Angeles Times. I'm embedded with our politics team, so I actually work out of the Washington, D.C. bureau. Yeah.
Kyle.
Okay. Hey guys, I'm Kyle. I'm a graphics reporter at the Wall Street Journal. And I started this job actually during right when the pandemic happened. And so I previously used to be Adrian's colleague, coworker, and am now still in LA, but working remotely like everyone.
And Andrew.
And I'm Andrew Tran, and I'm a data reporter on the Washington Post investigative team, and I'm still here in DC.
Cool. So for anybody here who doesn't, they just know your jobs, but like, what do you guys do on like a day-to-day basis?
I can start. So audience engagement kind of differs from newsroom to newsroom. I feel like it's a very new space in a lot of newsrooms, but for me, the day-to-day job is sort of a mix of digital strategy. So that's looking at our strategy on and off platform. So on our website, on social media, in a bunch of our news products, like newsletters. I also help out with our partnership with news aggregators. So that's stuff like Apple News. The other half of the job is sort of more breaking news oriented. So that's helping out with products like mobile push alerts, email breakers. I also do a lot of work with our live blogs, which we run for a variety of breaking news events, and then also pushing out new products like live chat.
And I make graphics. I work primarily with the Wall Street Journal is a little bit more bigger than the LA Times department. So it's kind of more focused by sections. And so I'm working primarily with a team of editors and reporters in enterprise investigations, features, and sports, which is kind of a weird, sounds like a weird combination, but it's kind of cool for me because I get to work with a lot of desks. So anything from charts, maps, interactives, yeah.
So I report, I write, and I primarily do a lot of data analysis, and that involves everything along the spectrum of it, whether it's gathering data, raw data, transforming unstructured data into structured data that I can then analyze and write stories off of. Sometimes it's scraping data off websites, but it's primarily to kind of be able to see what's happening in the news and respond quickly and find data around it and really expand on whatever the big story is of the day. And also set up tools and processes that will enable me to respond quickly to breaking news in the future.
So I think part of the reason why we're running this panel, I know when I was getting started, and I knew that this was like the career path I wanted to take, I always tried to ask people like how they got their start, because I found that a lot of news nerds like they had their hands in a lot of different places. Like maybe they were a reporter over here and they like tried some graphics, or they had a story here that they had to use some, like, they had to run some data through, or like use a spreadsheet for something. So how did you guys get your start in your respective fields? And if you want to go like further into your whole journalism journey, you can go ahead and do that.
For me, like I said, audience is kind of like a weird overlap between a lot of departments in a lot of newsrooms. So I didn't even know that working in audience engagement or doing social media full time or doing digital strategy was something that people did. So when I was an undergrad, I basically wanted to be like a political reporter. I wanted to cover local government. I did an internship at CNN on their politics breaking news team. And it was there that I sort of was exposed to this like digital strategy side of things. So I did that internship and then ended up basically just pivoting to digital only roles. So I was online managing editor of my college paper, where we started a social media team. And then a couple of stints later, I like got my first full-time job out of college. So I graduated in 2017. And it was like just social media focused. And I think it was there that I realized that, oh, this is a full-time job in which there needs to be somebody looking at metrics. There needs to be somebody who's helping like do search engine optimization. There's somebody who needs to project manage like a bunch of different teams like on a big thing that you're rolling out. So that's how I sort of got to where I am today.
Yeah, for me, I actually, now that I think about it, I don't think all of our jobs probably exist, or like at least in the same shape or like way it's done nowadays. But I actually, and when I was in college, I did kind of the traditional like working in the newspaper, writing, and I spent a lot of time back in the day when what was called multimedia reporting was like really cool and new. So I worked with a lot of mediums and different platforms for reporting. And I think that was what always interested me, kind of the new, exciting, different ways to do journalism. And I got my first job working on an online news startup that called Global Post, and they only did international news. And that's what I originally was really interested in and got inspired, why I got inspired to do journalism. And I like a lot of graphics reporters, kind of started in news production, online, being an online news producer. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about story packaging and producing, and that kind of organically just lent itself. I would kind of start spending some of my free time, if I had it at work, to like do some data visualization for some of these packages. And then I really, it wasn't until the LA Times called and that I got my really formal training in what a graphics reporter is and how to do data visualization. Because I think back when I was just doing it, figuring it out on my own, I was like, that was back when like Google Fusions and like Tableau was just starting. So just like a lot of random ways, kind of freewheeling, figuring out by myself. And then I just started at Wall Street Journal last year. So it's on and off been probably six years in data visualization.
Okay, so I'll probably split this in half, and the second half related to another question, because I've been around a while and this would take forever. So acknowledging that, I think this is going to resonate with a lot of you. When in college, my parents wanted to be, all my friends were going to be pharmacists and doctors, and I was going to be a lawyer. And I was going I was taking, really getting this close to getting the LSATs until I, deep down, I really wanted to be a writer, and so I think I wanted practice. So I went down to the college newspaper, and that's where I really started, falling in love with, the daily deadlines and generating something really quickly. And, I can get something that connects with an audience. After that, I went through a bunch of fellowships, like for young journalists right out of college. So like Chips Quinn fellow, I was in MetPro, and like that was my focus, was just writing and reporting and beat reporting. And I was at the Sun Sentinel, was one of my first jobs, and I kind of was trying everything. I was one of the first like mobile backpack journalists. I mean, that was back in the day when you're supposed to take video, write the story, edit that video, and then put it up all in one complete package out from your like car, you know. And so I was getting tired of that, so I bothered a bunch of graphics people and told, made them teach me how to learn Flash. So that's also how old I am. So I did a lot of that stuff and so I was just trying to like figure out what I wanted to do, and I was inspired by others, and I just tried to learn how to do it and just learn as much as possible. So that was how I got my start, and I'll continue later.
I actually didn't know about that, Andrew. So that's pretty funny. Flash, rest in peace. So what are some challenges that you've experienced like on your way, like on this career path? Because like Kyle said, a lot of our jobs like didn't exist like 5, maybe even 10 years ago. This is all kind of like a new thing. So what are some challenges you've experienced like along your journey, and how have you kind of dealt with them or overcome them?
For me, I think it's in a lot of newsrooms, because the audience space or focusing on audience work and doing digital experimentation is so new. I think I've run into a lot of instances where folks in the newsroom, A, probably don't fully understand what I do or how I can help amplify their work. And B, there are people who may not be fully convinced or be on board with digital experimentation or even focusing on capturing digital metrics. So those are sort of two things that have been difficult so far in my career. And I think the one way that I've approached it, and I think a lot of audience editors approach it, is you really do just have to sit down with folks. And, I'm an embedded editor, so I work very closely with our politics team. So I have the luxury of hosting workshops and overseeing their day-to-day work in progress. So I think a lot of it is just showing through evidence, like we did X, Y, and Z thing to produce X, Y, and Z result. I think over time, just reiterating those sorts of facts and sort of using those things to prove your worth in the newsroom. I think that's something that I've had to come to terms with, and that's something that I try to do time and time again, just to advocate for myself.
I definitely feel that too. For on the graphics front, I feel you. I would say for graphics reporting, I am definitely not one of those people, and I envy those people who are the gifted, coders out there who just kind of pick up new languages very easily. For me, it's often a challenge, and I think part of the challenge, and also part of the reason why I really have enjoyed kind of the field of graphics reporting, is just the breadth and depth of skills that you can specialize in and learn and do. And oftentimes it can be very overwhelming to try to figure out to learn all of them, or if you think you need to learn all of them. But I think starting small, picking something like a topic that you enjoy, and just like really breaking down, like instead of maybe trying to like master JavaScript, maybe you learn how to like build a very simple like calculator, and start small. And I think that's something that's kind of helped me not feel so overwhelmed or like inadequate sometimes. But it's definitely like it's something that is a challenge, but also like kind of motivates you to learn new things. So
I'll name a couple. First big one is being laid off. It sucks, and it's going to be a reality for a number of us, and probably has been for some of you. And so to kind of overcome that was being able to just pivot and just say, okay, I'm going to try to take these other what opportunities are out there, so I can still be in the newsroom, even if I'm not going to be writing as much. And so I had to take an online producer position. And then it was just a matter of like going regional to regional to regional in the newsroom. But kind of the biggest challenge was for me was when I was an online producer and I felt really kind of stuck doing mundane things that I didn't think was good. And okay, so what it was I was spending a lot of my time building photo galleries. And as an online producer, it's a thing that, but you're going to be sometimes that, what is the equivalent today? I don't know. It's something that drives a lot of traffic that is like it's not really challenging you. So what I did was I was able to notice other people who were kind of also disaffected. There was a older data reporter who was kind of put out to pasture a little bit out in a regional paper, bureau paper, who wasn't getting, able to do as much. There was like a developer who was also really kind of bored. And there was another person on my team who was also fed up with all these photo galleries. And so what we did was we would team up with this data reporter, and we would all come up, brainstorm these packages, these projects, data-driven projects that would like really emphasize stuff that we still had to do. We had to create for these photo galleries. So like, we'll do data-driven photo galleries, but also these stories and interactives and viz around it. And so what was really required was to get like some buy-in, from my boss and their boss, and like say like, this is going to be an experiment. We're going to try this. We're going to still do the obligated like bullshit, but give us time to give us some time to focus on this. And then if it's successful, we'll talk about that. And so fortunately it was successful, and we were able to continue doing that, and we were able to set more permanent time aside so that we could develop those projects and really kind of develop and create our own mini skunkworks data team at the Globe. And then everything's kind of followed for me since then.
So kind of building off that, Andrew, it's kind of like the next question is kind of, what's your number one piece? What is your guys' number one piece of advice for someone, who's in an online producer role, or is in a reporter role trying to get more into data, or is in an online producer role trying to get more into design or graphics? For someone who's maybe early career or student, like what's your number one piece of advice to like help make that pivot a little bit easier?
I think something that's helped me a lot early on in my career, honestly, is just to reach out to people that you admire and reach out to people who you see doing very good work. I think there's no harm in asking someone, hey, can I take you out for coffee and tell me about your job and tell me about, like your start and how you, built your career. And then if it's somebody, within your company, I think, and this is something that I try to do, is, asking if I can shadow them, or, asking my manager if I can take one day a week to work on a special project in a department that's outside of mine. I think a good manager will obviously want you to grow. And I think, asking for like one day or half day to pursue something different is worthwhile, while you are doing the thing that you're, currently doing or hired to do.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute fast enough. Yeah, I want to echo that. There can be so many tips. It could be hard to narrow down. But I think if you're early career, the thing that helped me was really kind of figuring out either if it's something you can do through your work, or if it has to be outside of your work, doing what that is that interests you, figuring out a way to make it work, either at work or not, or at home. But also, there is a whole kind of, you have to figure out, if that's something that you want to pursue career-wise, if that's something that can be done at your current job, and if it's not something that can really be done, if you can create a space, if you have the people in your organization that are your mentors or your bosses, that you can figure out a way to make that work, and cultivate. I think what I'm trying to say is like the the thing that like a lot of people that I had to kind of figure out through tea leaves a little bit in my early career is like the whole quote unquote like politics of getting what you want out of your career at and not just kind of being good at what you do. And so there is a lot of kind of, you have to build your mentors and find your people who like Andrew found the people in his newsroom who were also bored but really exceptionally talented and wanted to do something. And so kind of really making that plan of how are you gonna get what you want out of your career.
Yeah, it's exactly it. You're gonna have to like carve it out yourself, really. Like for me, when I got into data journalism, I took like 4 or 5. There was a moment where I was taking 4 or 5 MOOCs outside of work, just like going home and doing all this homework. But it was something I wanted to do, and it's not just learning those skills; it's figuring out a way to apply them to your current work and enhance it. And so, what I kind of figured out was every story you do, every project you work on, should have a piece of a bridge that you are building toward your next position, toward your next job, where it is you want to work. It's got to be building toward that, and so that when that bridge is done, you can cross it.
Yeah, I just echo that too, just as like a piece of advice. I know we have a lot of students in here. I was a reporter for a really long time. I started reporting when I was in high school. And when I was a junior in college, I realized that reporting just wasn't for me. And I'd taken all these computer science classes, but part of it is also, it wasn't just taking all the computer science classes, taking everything I had learned from computer science and applying it to like my journalism classes. So I would find ways to basically skirt around syllabi by saying, hey, can I do this for the final project instead of, this over here? So just trying to find like these enterprisey ways of like getting around the system to try to build, like Andrew said, like build that bridge towards where you want to get to go. So if someone, so like after this meeting, whenever this is over in the next like half hour or so, like what's one actionable step that someone could take if they wanted to like, if they got on this call and they wanted to like, I'm super motivated and I want to go do something. What's one thing that they could do to kind of help them along in their career path?
I know I said this earlier and I just really want to echo the sentiment again. Just reach out to one person that you really admire. It can be a long shot, it can be a Twitter DM, it can be an email. I think one thing I really regret early on in my career, so when I was an undergrad, I didn't reach out to enough people, and I really regret that because there are so many people who will want to pay it forward because someone did it for them as well in their career. And for them to sit down and to talk to you and to answer your questions or to calm your anxieties about the industry, I think just reaching out to one person or a few people, setting up a time to talk to them. If you reach out to 5 people, your chances are pretty high for someone to respond, and it could be a potential mentorship opportunity, or it could just be a chat. So you never know, but it's always worth it to reach out.
That's a really good advice. I think to build on that too, I think really finding what I've learned, like what people would say is like your board of trustees is like, you need to figure out what you want to do in your career and really find the key people who can help you do that. And I think early on when I was like in college, I didn't really understand what networking meant. Like in my head, I thought it was like, oh, I have to like try to be chummy with someone to like get them to give me something. But it really is just like establishing a relationship and not necessarily thinking you're going to get something immediate out of it, but it's building a network where you're at the point where you can, where your skills are ready, when you're ready to do more, you have the network of people to help you get to what you want to do. And I think, it's always hard to give advice because journalism is like one of those industries where it's it's not the same pipeline, and so which kind of sucks. But for me, at least for me personally, like it was, I have the privilege to say like my last 2 jobs were jobs that I didn't apply for. Like I wasn't actively looking. It was something that, through like, my time spending as a student in AAJA, going to all the conventions, like talking to people, finding mentors in my local chapter, going on like there's affinity groups out online like for any interest. And so whatever your career interests are, if it's like, if you want to know how to do like audience engagement, if you want to learn how to code, if you want to learn, how to do anything really, there are groups out there. And so it's really just spending that time. And I know it can be really hard if you're not like naturally inclined to. I am definitely not naturally inclined person to be like, I'm not really an extrovert or anything, but it's one of those skills that they don't really teach you in college courses or early career. It's kind of that to me was like kind of a key way to do figure out what I wanted to do.
I will just add really fast, Andrew, sorry to cut you off. I got my current job by Twitter DMing my current manager. We had never met before, and I saw that she posted something, and I just kind of shot the shot and ended up interviewing like 2 days later and ended up getting the job. So you honestly never know.
I would say find your tribe. Find people that who think like you, or you want to think like, or you want to emulate. Whether it's like networking like at IRE or NICAR or ONA or what SMD, if that's your passion and that's something you want to work toward. And also surround yourself with the smartest people, the smartest, nicest people who will, be willing to share their knowledge. And like, you want to ask them to, like, if there's a story that pops up, send them a note, compliment them on it, and then ask them to like set some time aside for like, a Zoom coffee now these days. And like, you can't really go walk with them to get coffee anymore, but ask them like really detailed questions on how they did this or how they approached, whatever it is they did, or something that you thought was really unique. They'll love that. Journalists love talking about themselves. And, that's also part of networking.
Well, that was all great. Just wanted to remind everybody, we have a Google form in chat if you wanted to submit a question for anybody. We've already had a few come in. So I'll start with this one for Kyle and Andrew. Since tools and skills that might have been widely used in the industry 5 or 6 years ago, they gave Flash an example, are not used anymore, would you approach your initial pivots into graphics or data any differently if you were starting your career today?
Andrew, do you want to start?
All right, sure, because I'm not really in. Okay, I would say I have more of a, I wouldn't go to pre-law courses. I would go into computer science. I would know how to, the basics of good programming. I would take, statistical courses. So I mean, looking back, I wish I had, because those seem to be much more valuable than philosophy.
At least for graphics, I think based on my time working in now two like traditional newspaper, like newsroom newspapers, like there's definitely has been a transition in graphics journalism. I think like old school graphics journalism used to be a lot more like illustration. And I'm not knocking on those because those are still super valuable and can be like 3D graphics is a huge thing now, but like it's definitely transitioned towards more like code based, but it's tough because I don't want to prescribe. It's hard because you can't really like foresee what's gonna be out and what's gonna be still current, because I think a lot of our work, a lot of my work at least from like 5 years ago it's like you can't see online anymore. But I would say, I mean, there are definitely like people still use Illustrator. So if you wanted to learn how to, I mean, you could do a lot of cool stuff on Illustrator. I think a lot of newsrooms, it's more of a mindset of like, however you can do it is okay. I think depending on what newsroom you're in, there might be more of a culture of like, there are more R oriented versus Python users, but like, I wouldn't get too worried about like, especially if you're early career, like you have to learn, you have to know like D3 or you have to know JavaScript. I don't think most people who would hire you would expect you to be like a master of anything. So as long as your work kind of shows the potential and your like what kind of your process of you being a good journalist, really, I think that in itself is important.
Yeah, just to reemphasize Kyle's point, I don't regret learning Flash. I don't regret learning how to use Final Cut. Those are all very valuable things because it's still, we had to apply those to stories and figure out stories and use all these different tools to tell stories. So yeah, throughout your career, it's going to be, the tools are going to change, the emphasis will change, the priorities will change. And it's just, you just have to be able to adapt quickly and just keep the priority on being able to tell good stories with it.
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what I was actually going to say. It's just the tools always change, but always having that like kind of inner desire to just like keep learning, and something that's going to improve journalism too. That's just probably the number one most important thing. Here's another question. What are some of the most original / fun ways you guys have been able to adapt a story to data and social?
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Sorry, what are some of the most original / fun ways you guys have been able to adapt a story to data and socials? I feel like Kyle's like had so many cool projects that I've seen, or just memorable projects in general. Just a general like broad question, like memorable project that you guys have worked on. Maybe we can change it.
All right, this was a fun one, but it was totally dumb. So like one of the projects I was doing at the Boston Globe was, with this team, well, for some reason we got really into coffee, really dissecting coffee. And for some reason we looked at, we mapped out all the Dunkin' Donuts, okay? Because in Boston and Massachusetts in general, New England in particular, there's so many damn Dunkin' Donuts. And we're like, where are the closest Dunkin' Donuts to each other? And we found so many Dunkins that just happened to be right across the street from each other, just like using data and filtering and all that. And so we did interactives, we did stories off that, and of course a photo gallery of these places. So yeah, it was just fun.
One that we did at the tail end of election season. So we wanted to experiment with reader callouts. Usually the typical way we do them is basically we have a form on the website. We wanted to do something different. So we set up a Google Voice account. So it was like a phone number you could call into. So we asked people who are first-time voters to call in and to leave voicemails talking about what this election meant to them if they were a first-time voter. We took a bunch of the voicemails, laid it out on a page, and then ended up writing, one of our reporters who on election night was covering first-time voters was able to use it as sort of a database of sourcing. Yeah, so not really a way of translating a story on social, but using social or a cool tool to report a story out.
I'm trying to think of the wackiest. I think the wackiest, there's definitely been some fun projects when I was at the LA Times. Not that I'm saying there aren't fun projects at the Washington Journal, it's just my time has been too short. to have a lot of examples. But I think one example of like trying to like make data interesting was I had like this huge database of very scientific, like it was like a study, and it was basically a huge database of like water footprint conversions of like every conceivable food item. And I think I forgot how exactly started, but I was just kind of digging into the data, and this was around the time when like the drought was really bad in California. And so I think I like originally pitched an idea of just like a data visualization of like visualizing like how much water does it take to like eat a plate of food, and like the food would depend on, it could like let the users randomly pick food, and it would like show you how much water it took. And I like it somehow got approved, and like I ended up having to like style the food. I ended up like using the test kitchen at the LA Times to like cook the food, and like I got a photographer to take really cool nice like photos, and then I had to like produce everything and code everything to get put together. It was probably one of the most challenging, but it was definitely also like not my usual, like not something I would usually be doing. Another project that my colleagues did at the Times was they were able to go to Disneyland and do an entire project on how on like waiting in line in Disneyland by rides, and they were smart enough to get, you know, figure out something that would be fun and get the company to pay them to to go and do. And so that was pretty fun.
Here's a question specifically for Andrew, because it's about data analysis. But someone asked, for those interested in working in data analysis, how critical is it to know statistical/programming language? And which one do you recommend learning for someone with no programming experience? Just as plug, Andrew has a great website to learn R. It's incredible. That's how I learned R.
Yeah, so I'm a little biased. I suggest learning R. I mean, you don't really need to have a background in statistics. That's all stuff you can kind of teach on your own. They have great like walkthrough tutorials out there, great books. As long as you really like the basics is just knowing your way around a spreadsheet. That's all you really need to know. Because anyone can be a data journalist. You just need to like have the right mindset for it. You know, find something that interests you, and then just see how often that happens. You know, can you quantify it? That's it. So the more, and honestly, the kind of the deeper you go in the statistical methods for finding stories, it's going to be a little bit more of an uphill battle trying to, if you can't really explain it to your editors and to readers, then it's probably going to not end up being in a story. So sometimes like I would love if I could add more linear regression type modeling results in my stories, but in the end, sometimes it's like, well, why don't we just do a pivot table? So I would say a lot of the stuff you need to do is just in Excel and in pivot tables. The bigger the data sets, you might need to learn Python, you might need to learn R, and all I can kind of recommend about that is just find a really supportive community around that. And that's why I use R, because I mean, it takes less time to spin up all the systems that you would need to do in other programming languages. And the community is just so open and friendly and supportive.
Okay, here's another question for you three. What advice do you have in terms of pursuing your interests with your current job if your manager isn't particularly supportive?
I feel like I would need a little bit more information about on that to give a good answer. Oftentimes, in my experience, I've not really I've never really had a boss where they just flat out told me no. They might have needed some convincing or some like examples of it, like for them making sense for you to do that. And so again, without really knowing the specifics, some additional questions I would ask is like, is what you want to do? Like how different is what you're doing in your current job? Like how different is it? Because if it's like it's kind of like the job you're doing, but a little bit different, it might be easier to do. Like when I was just like started doing random data vises, it was not in my job description at all. It was just like I kind of started doing it on my own to like complement these news packages. And so I think kind of slowly building that, if you're able to like basically pitch to your boss why this would benefit the newsroom or the work that you're doing, you kind of have to figure out like what are your boss's priorities in that like specific situation, and trying to figure out what would make him or her say yes, if that makes sense. And if no, then if they're completely just not into it, then it's just something you'll probably have to figure out to do on your time outside of work. And then I would say, then figure out, how can you either transition to do more of that kind of job? Is this something your company can support you in, or if not, then where can you go from your current position?
I think a lot of the times managers are quick to say no because they know personally that if you're trying to like learn a new skill, they're going to have to find someone to teach you, and they don't want to find those resources a lot of the times. They think, other folks in the newsroom are also very busy. So a part of it, I think I really agree with what Kyle said. Sometimes you do just have to seek out the resources outside of the newsroom. And, that could be contacting someone in another newsroom or, asking to be put in touch with someone. I think in my experience, asking for tasks and things you want to grow in outside of your current job capacity, I think you just really have to show your manager that you're able to do your job very well. And then if there is extra time, then they're probably more willing to, let you explore somewhere else. Because if you're not doing your job, to the best of your ability and your capacity, then it's a very easy no for them because, you were hired to do this one thing. But once you, get in a rhythm and you can, maybe have an afternoon to just try out this other task, an audience editor who wants to have some line editing experience, maybe editing 1 or 2 stories, but just definitely showing that your current job is already done, that you have, that the extra time is really just extra time. You're done with all of your tasks already.
Yeah, Adrian's totally right. You gotta kind of put yourself in the mindset of your manager, who is kind of going to be resistant to change. So as Kyle said, you have to kind of pitch it in a way that will benefit your manager somehow, make them look good or help out some sort of metric that they are really fascinated or obsessed with, and then slowly build it into that, and kind of like, it's you can't do one huge thing right away. You got to slowly build up this trust. Be like, okay, I did this, you let me do this. It didn't mess anything up. I was still meeting these other goals. Can I try it again? And so, maybe you don't say like, I want to do it again right away. Just be like, you just have to like pick your battles and figure out a way to like sneak whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish so that it is in line with theirs as well. When all is fails, if your manager is in a hole, you got to find yourself a new manager, ultimately.
Another question. Where do you guys go to like find inspiration for kind of like your like field, I guess? Like where do you look to find inspiration for like, hey, that was a really cool project, that maybe I could replicate something like that in my own newsroom?
For social, I build like a bunch of feeds through CrowdTangle. So basically I have a daily digest for every single platform, basically, for really high performing posts. And that usually correlates with like either a big breaking news event or like a cool project that someone did. And our team actually sits down every week during our weekly meeting, and people usually bring 1 or 2 things that are pretty inspiring, or cool things that maybe we could probably not fully replicate, but take inspiration from. So just keeping tabs on what competitors are doing, and if they do something that flops, like don't do that. But if they do something that's really inspirational, like you can take something from it.
Yes, plus one emoji to Adrian's advice. You basically have to be, you have to read the news. Really is like, I mean, it's kind of part of everyone's. If you're a journalist, it's just kind of like a byproduct now of just reading what other people are doing. I personally love like weird graphics, and so or just like not traditionally like newsy in either content or aesthetic. And so I usually gravitate towards things like the pudding visuals concept, or also like Bloomberg does some really cool stuff. But yeah, it's just a lot of like making Twitter lists of people whose work you admire, or publications of work that you admire, and just like saying up on it.
I'm a big proponent of following people who aren't in journalism. Who, if you're into data, find some statisticians, find some data viz people who have nothing to do with journalism at all. If you like really good writing, find some really great writers, authors, follow them. Just so you're always kind of exposed to what they're seeing and what they're sharing, because then you'll be, hopefully pick up some seeds of new ideas or new techniques that they are sharing or hearing about. So, I've got a hashtag, R stats. So I'm seeing all these new libraries and methods that other people are coming up with. And then I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I should try to apply that. Maybe I can figure out a way to apply that to a data set next time I see it. So it's just always stuff like, just kind of storing in the, in the back of your mind, but always stay, figure out other domains and follow along. I mean, just stuff that you're interested in,
And I would say another one, and this is kind of timely with like NICAR coming up, is, even though all these conferences are virtual now, but, go to a virtual SourceCon or virtual NICAR. And that also ties in with other stuff that we talked about earlier, like finding a mentor or talking to somebody or finding someone you admire, and just talking to them to kind of pick their brain about a certain project or about how they got to where they're at. I know every time I've gone to a NICAR or SourceCon, I've come away from that, sort of environment, like really inspired, or motivated to learn something new or try something different when I get back to my job day one. So here's another question. I'm not sure how many of you guys can like speak to this because I don't know all of your like career background and stuff, but can you speak to any of the differences between trying to go into like a news nerd role at a big legacy newsroom versus a smaller like local paper or like a nonprofit or something like that?
So I've been in 3 newsrooms, 2 of which are legacy, although different in terms of like size of company. So I would say when I was first doing it in a startup environment, it was very hard to find other people that did what I wanted to do, because there was no one that was doing it in that particular company. And I think as you go to at least go to larger newsrooms, the difference is that it's kind of nice to have like departments. And I know that it's not this is not like a normal thing, because a lot of newsrooms don't have the resources, but there's definitely a difference in terms of like just plain like people in your department who you can like ask questions and work with and brainstorm ideas with. Yeah, I don't know how it is it with you, Andrew, at Washington Post.
So yeah, I've been through the whole range of things. I mean, I was in a small nonprofit newsroom where I was kind of like one of the only coders, and that can be tough because you're required to wear so many different hats, and you're in a newsroom who doesn't really understand data as well, technology even. Like I remember having, whenever the printer would break, like different reporters would go to me and be like, "Hey, do you know what's going on?" I was like, "I'm not the fucking IT guy, okay?" But no one else was there, so I had to drop what I was doing and like freaking do it, and like other like administrative stuff, which is such a pain in the ass and distracts. And so I had to like come up with like ways of like coming up with ways like let them do it themselves. So I would have to create tools so they could create charts, maps, and tables so that they could do it themselves and not bother me. So I could focus on the stuff I wanted to work on. And that's the tough thing, is like if you're at a smaller newsroom, you're gonna have to be aware of so many different things. You're gonna have to do the data analysis, you're gonna have to do the data viz, you're gonna have to write the stories, you have to embed it and like do the social media behind it as well. It's and all the audience development as well. So it's can be really tough. Um, Whereas these bigger newsrooms, like the Post, they kind of prefer it if you are specialized. To be honest, they don't want someone who's like really great at a lot, slightly okay, slightly doing okay at all these different things. They want you to like, when they're hiring people, they're looking for like a slot, and they're thinking about all the composition of their team, and they're thinking, well, we have all these great map people, but we need someone who's really hyper focused on D3, or we need who's really good at D3, and other things like that. Like, oh, I need someone who's good at Python, because the rest of the team is really proficient in Python. So we want to think about that. So it can be tough to be able to think and predict what you can work on that you think might a bigger newsroom might need. But the thing is, like, the turnover, there's so many openings all the time. So if you just focus on what you want to do while juggling on these other responsibilities, and you build up your expertise in that one thing, that will help you in the long run, I think.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything both of you said. Prior to working at the LA Times, I was working at Foreign Policy magazine, so super small shop, like 15 full-time editorial employees, editors, reporters, and super, super small. So very different also from the LA Times, where our audience team is like 17 people. I will say the one thing, I guess, silver lining of working in such a small shop is that you do have to wear many hats, but if there is something that you feel like you don't really have experience in, you're sort of forced to do it. And you're sort of forced to learn. So that could be a good or bad thing, I guess. But I was hired as an engagement editor and ended up being a copy editor and running homepage and writing newsletters and just a bunch of different things. But I did pick up a lot of skills that I probably wouldn't have learned if I was in a bigger organization sort of off the bat.
Yeah, no, just to kind of piggyback off that, at the Strip, kind of our immediately like digital team, we have so many people who have just like, who work across disciplines like design and data, data design and audience, audience and design. And like when you bring a whole different sort of skill set to the table, like a skill set like that, where you can talk to the design person, but also talk to the data person over there, it's a super valuable skill set to have. So here's a kind of a relevant question. I'm sure, I don't know if you guys kind of read Sarah Simon's exit interview with Source. It's a really good article. It's a really good interview. Everyone here should read it. But someone asked how you can avoid burnout while still keeping up with the ways, kind of still keeping up with our field. And it's, journalism, and especially the digital space, is, evolving year over year, month over month. So how do you keep up with keep up with those fields, but also try to avoid, burnout and maintain your mental health?
The silence does not bode well. I feel like it's a tough question. I think it really depends on like where you are at in life. Like I can't speak to everyone's experience because like some people are dealing with like families and kids. But for me, it's like I've always had I don't know if it's the more sober or more realistic. I think I just had I'm really good at setting boundaries. And so like, yes, I think especially with journalism, it can be really easy to feel guilty if you don't know it, what you think you should be knowing, or if you don't have all the skills that you think you should be doing. Or like you're not like hardcore invested enough. But like for me, it's always been like I like journalism is great, but it's also a job. And so I think just setting clear for me, setting clear like what are the 2-3 things that are really important to you, you know, if you're just speaking in broad terms, not just about work, but like in for you personally in life, like and how can you like maintain that. And so coming up with really concrete things, concrete ways to manage that, because yeah, it's super easy to get burnout. I don't really have a I feel like I don't really have a good answer for that. Maybe the others do.
So I think one of the occupational hazards we have is we have the fear of missing out. Like Kyle said, a fear of missing out of, you know, some big news event. A mentor actually told me something once that really stuck with me, which is like, we work in the news business and there will always be news, like nonstop. So if you miss one thing, there will be like a million things in the next week to cover. So yeah, that's just one thing that I always think about. One thing that I do to set boundaries, which probably isn't for everybody, is that since my job is so enmeshed in working with social media, I actually unfollowed basically every news organization on Twitter and just made a private Twitter list of news organizations. So when I'm at work, I have my tweet deck open, the news orgs just have their own little stream. But when I'm off work hours, my Twitter feed is not inundated with like news. It's been pretty helpful. So yeah.
That's a great question. It's still one I'm struggling to come up with a way to deal with burnout. One thing that I've kind of become more telling myself to be more used to is just like, it's okay if I get scooped on things. It's okay, because like Adrian said, there's news is going to continue happening. There's going to be another chance to go at it a different way, or like, it's never a wasted time. Like if I spend a lot of time on a data analysis and it doesn't go anywhere, it can feel real frustrating, because you know, you didn't have a story produced, you don't have a result, you don't have a byline. But the thing is, like, you've still set up those steps, so then you become more intimately aware of the structure of what you're dealing with, so that when another opportunity comes, maybe there's an update, or maybe there's another thing that happens that's related to it, you can dust off the thing and then use it again, and you are, you know, one step closer in front of everyone else with that information. And just kind of overall, avoiding burnout is just, like I said, setting boundaries, and also being able to figure out a way, an activity, a hobby where you can just turn off the news. You know, have a group of friends where you're, you know, kind of like the goal of the night is just like, we're not going to talk about any politics, any news, anything that the president may or may not have tweeted, and just kind of distract yourselves with other things. And also, like, you know, for me, it's cooking. Like I just cook a lot, and I just like try all these different recipes. So just find a hobby, distract yourself. That's all I can say.
I actually love Adrian's advice. I might do that right after this.
It's a really scary step. I haven't followed like 200 plus accounts, but it's really gratifying, I think.
Yeah, that must have been like cathartic.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question. one that'll be like kind of less a little Debbie Downer. But what's one thing you're looking forward to or optimistic about this year in your field or just journalism overall?
I think one thing my team and I talk about a lot is, even though, you know, we're all stuck at home, and obviously for reporters, especially, reporting on the ground has been very different. But I think one thing that we've had to think a lot of, and will obviously continue to think more about, like COVID and beyond, is just how to reach audiences in different ways. I mean, that's something that drives our team anyways, but especially right now that everybody is home, like, how are we supposed to reach people? What are creative ways that we can sort of infiltrate smaller community groups? You know, we used to be able to hold a bunch of community events. Obviously, that's not the case anymore with COVID. So how are we reaching those groups? Is it, you know, through a new product, through a new vertical? Just thinking more creatively like that. So that's a silver lining, I guess, in all of the stuff that's been happening.
I think one thing I'm personally looking forward to is just, it's always exciting to work with like completely different people and like completely different like structure, like just relearning a new newsroom for me, especially during a pandemic. I don't know if I was so smart in picking a pandemic to learn all of that remotely, but I think it was a good time in my life, career-wise, to just kind of like figure out like how do these people like do what I do like differently, and just I think that was something that I was really looking for in the transition.
I'm looking forward to working back in a newsroom again. I kind of miss it. I'm looking forward to turning off my news alerts, because I can do that now. I'm looking forward to the more data reporters coming out there, just people learning and sharing their skills. I'm looking forward to people sharing their work and you know, talking about on social media and on blog posts, you know, how they did this big project, so I can keep learning. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all that.
All right. Well, that's like all the questions we had from the Google form. So we can go ahead and wrap it up here. Oh, Alex just asked me what I'm looking forward to. I don't know, me personally, just kind of being in Minneapolis, you know, there's a lot that happened in Minneapolis the past year, between COVID, George Floyd, just so much stuff. And I think being part in this community and, you know, being part of the team that helps cover it and being part of a paper that's going to help cover it as it all kind of unfolds in 2021, is going to be, I think, a really memorable experience for me. And it'll just be good to be in the newsroom to kind of help cover that story, and watch my colleagues do all that, because it's really important. But yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. Thanks again to Adrian, Kyle, and Andrew for being here.